Why did her footsteps sound louder than anyone else? The night had been still, too still, the kind of stillness that makes soldiers nervous because silence rarely means safety. In the hallway, dimly lit by flickering bulbs strung across concrete walls, her boots pressed against the floor one after the other, deliberate, echoing. Each step carried weight, not just her body's weight, something heavier, something unspoken. The others glanced up when she passed, but no one said a word. They didn't need to. They already knew she wasn't just walking toward another assignment. She was walking toward something no one else wanted to touch. Her name was Captain Elena Rios, call sign Ash. The name stuck not because of fire but because of what followed after fire. Quiet, residue, a reminder that something had burned and something had been lost. She carried that loss in her chest, the way others carried medals. The night smelled faintly of diesel and dust. The generator outside hummed like a restless heart. She reached the operations room, pushed open the door, and felt all eyes track her at once. A map spread across the table, dotted with red markers like wounds that refused to close. Intelligence reports stacked high, black coffee cups drained and forgotten. A low buzz of conversation stopped when she entered. Why did the silence feel heavier than the mission? Colonel Harrigan cleared his throat, his voice gravel-wrapped in fatigue. "Rios, you're late." She said nothing, not an excuse, not an apology. She simply stood there, eyes narrowing at the map. And that silence, her silence, said more than words could. The colonel shifted, uncomfortable. Everyone else did too, because when she was silent it wasn't weakness, it was a mirror, and in that mirror they saw their own doubts. The mission brief began. Enemy compound, outer perimeter patrols, possible hostages inside. No clean intel, risk of crossfire high, probability of walking into a trap even higher. And yet, the colonel said, tapping the map, "We go in, midnight." A ripple of unease. No one argued, though some wanted to. They weren't afraid of the colonel's wrath. They were afraid of what not going in meant. Elena's jaw clenched. Her hand rested on the table, fingertips brushing the edge of the map. A faint scar along her knuckles caught the light. She'd been here before. Not this compound, not this night, but here. The space between choice and consequence, between order and execution. And this time she carried a truth she hadn't spoken aloud. Not yet. Because this mission wasn't just about strategy. For her, it was personal. She leaned over the map, scanning routes, escape paths, choke points. The team watched her, waiting for her to speak. She didn't. She traced a line with her finger, then withdrew it. Quiet again. A sergeant broke the tension. "Ash, you see something we do." Her eyes lifted. They were dark, unwavering, but shadowed by something deeper. "Just the obvious," she said. "We won't all make it out." A bitter truth, spoken without emotion, and it cut through the room sharper than the colonel's orders. No one laughed, no one dismissed it. They all knew she wasn't a pessimist. She was precise, and when precision says death, you listen. Still, the colonel nodded curtly. "Get your gear, wheels up in 30. The team scattered. Boots against concrete murmured prayers, the metallic click of rifles being checked and rechecked. Elena lingered. She stared at the red marker on the map, its plastic sheen mocking her. That building wasn't just another objective, not for her. Because inside, if the intel wasn't wrong, was someone she'd been searching for longer than the others knew. Someone tied to a decision she could never forgive herself for. But she couldn't tell them that, not yet. She turned and left the room. The night air slapped her face with dust and chill. The base smelled of oil, sweat, and iron, war's perfume. She pulled her jacket tighter, though it wasn't the cold that unsettled her. Her squad gathered near the vehicles, faces tense. Jokes forced, brittle, dying before they reached a smile. That's how soldiers fought fear, pretend it wasn't there. Private Dawson sat on the curb, head bowed, fingers fiddling with a small silver locket. Inside was a picture of his daughter. He didn't notice Elena watching him, but she noticed everything. his knuckles white, his lips moving in a silent promise. Sergeant Vega smoked in the shadows, every exhale a ghost dissolving into the dark. His brother had been killed on a mission just like this one, months before. He never spoke about it, but the way he held the cigarette, trembling like it was his anchor, told the story. They were human, all of them, not pawns, not statistics. Lives heavy with meaning ready to be spent. And Elena felt the weight of every one of them pressing down on her chest. A voice cut through her thoughts. "You're too quiet, Ash." It was Ramirez, her second in command. Taller, broader, his presence usually filled a space, but with her it always felt like he was trying too hard. He studied her now, searching her face. "You don't like the op," he said. Her eyes didn't move from the convoy lined up, engines idling. "I don't like the odds." He smirked faintly. "Since when have odds stopped you?" Her silence was his answer, and it wasn't the one he wanted. The ride out was long. Darkness stretched on both sides of the road, broken only by occasional flickers of villages long abandoned. The engine's growl filled the silence. No one spoke. Soldiers don't waste words before a storm. Elena sat in the back, rifle resting across her lap. Her eyes half closed, but her mind racing. Every bump in the road rattled her bones, but it was the memories rattling her heart that hurt more. She remembered another night, another convoy, another mission where the intel had been wrong. She remembered screams in the comms, smoke rising where her friends had been, and one decision, hers, that left a man behind, a man who trusted her, a man she swore she'd find again. And now maybe he was in that compound. Maybe. She clenched her fists, nails biting into her palms. No one noticed. They thought she was calm, but calm was a mask, and behind it her chest burned with a mixture of dread and longing. The convoy stopped, engines cut, night swallowed them whole. They moved out on foot, boots sinking into dirt, rifles raised, breaths shallow. The stars above watched like indifferent witnesses. Ahead the compound rose out of the earth, a jagged silhouette against the horizon, barbed wire like a crown of thorns, towers standing like silent sentinels. Elena froze for just a moment. Her pulse hammered in her throat. She stared at that structure as if it were alive, breathing, waiting. "Move," Ramirez whispered. She nodded once, steadying herself. Step by step they crept closer, shadows within shadows. The first shot rang out, a crack that split the night. A bullet hit the dirt near Vega's foot, spraying dust. The silence shattered. Chaos, gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes stuttering like lightning. Voices shouted in languages twisted by fear and rage. The squad hit the ground, returning fire. Elena's body moved before her mind could. She rolled, aimed, squeezed enemy down. Another burst, ducked, returned fire, another fell. Her heartbeat synced with the rhythm of war. Yet inside it wasn't adrenaline that drove her. It was the thought of a face, a memory, a promise. "Push forward," the colonel's voice barked in her earpiece. She pushed, through smoke, through fire, through screams. Her boots striking the dirt with that same heavy sound they had in the hallway, each step echoing. And as bullets sliced past her, one thought seared through her mind, louder than the chaos around her. If he's in there, alive tonight, she would not fail him again. What was she really running toward? The bullets rained down like iron rain, shredding the dirt, sparking against metal. Her squad hugged the earth, firing back, their shouts drowned in the chaos. But Elena moved differently, not recklessly, purposefully. Every inch she crawled, every sprint between cover, was driven not just by survival but by something stronger. Her eyes weren't fixed on the enemies in the towers. They were fixed on the compound itself. Inside those walls, she believed, was the answer to a question that had haunted her for years, a question too heavy to share. "Cover left," Ramirez shouted, his voice strained. He fired in bursts, teeth clenched, smoke curling around him. Elena rose from the dirt, sprinted, rolled into cover behind a half-collapsed wall. Her chest heaved. Her cheek pressed against the rifle's stock, sights scanning through flashes of chaos. One hostile down, another scrambling into shadows. But she didn't celebrate. She didn't breathe relief. She just kept moving forward. Rios, the colonel's voice cut through the comms. Flank east, take Vega, Dawson, and Ramirez, clear the entry point. Orders, always orders. And she obeyed them, but tonight, her obedience carried her closer to something else. On me, she hissed, signaling her team. They moved in rhythm. Vega, steady but tense, eyes flicking everywhere like a man who expected betrayal from the shadows. Dawson, too young, too green, clutching that locket inside his vest like it might stop bullets. Ramirez, solid, his trust in her almost stubborn. The four of them slipped east, hugging shadows, stepping over debris that crunched under boots no matter how careful they were. The gunfire at the front masked their approach, a cruel symphony of war buying them seconds. The compound loomed larger now. The wall, scarred with holes, felt like a boundary not just of stone but of fate. Elena pressed her back against it, eyes scanning, ears straining. The sounds of shouting, the metallic sting of spent shells, the smell of smoke clinging to her lungs. Ramirez leaned in. "You got that look, Ash." She didn't turn to him. "What look?" "The one you get before you do something no one else understands." For a heartbeat, she almost told him, almost let him see the truth rattling in her chest, but the words never came. Not here, not yet. She raised a fist signal. Vega and Dawson moved into position, weapons ready. Ramirez gave a sharp nod. Then silence, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. Elena slipped around the corner, rifle raised. Her eyes adjusted instantly, dark hallway, faint glow of lanterns, shadows shifting. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Two guards, one step too slow, two shots. Two bodies hit the ground, silent thuds against the dust. She moved in, heart pounding, her team closed behind. The interior smelled of damp stone and iron. Doors lined the corridor, some locked, some cracked open. Every creak of the floor beneath their boots echoed like thunder. "Clear left," Vega whispered, his voice low, tight. "Clear right," Dawson added, his rifle trembling slightly in his hands. They advanced deeper, and with each step Elena's chest tightened. She knew what she was hopping for, but hope was dangerous. Hope blinded, hope killed. Still, she couldn't stop it. At the third door she froze. Something inside her shifted. A memory resurfaced. A man's voice, calm but stern. "If you go left, you live. If you go right, you save me. Choose wisely, Rios." And that night, years ago, she went left. Her hand hovered near the door, her breath shallow. "Captain?" Ramirez asked softly, noticing her hesitation. She blinked, masking the storm in her chest. "Stack up, breach on my signal." They lined up, Vega at the door, Dawson behind him, Ramirez covering. Elena counted down in her head, 3, 2, 1. The door swung inward with a crack. They surged in, rifles sweeping the room. Empty, just crates, ammunition, supplies. Her heart dropped, though her face showed nothing. She backed out, motioning forward, "Keep moving." But the thought lingered like a knife. Maybe he's not here. Maybe it was all a lie. The corridor stretched endlessly, every door another chance, another disappointment. Then faint, a sound, muffled, human. Dawson perked. "Did you hear that?" They all froze. The sound came again, a cough, ragged and weak, from somewhere deeper inside. Elena's blood turned to fire. She didn't wait for orders. She pushed forward, faster now, steps echoing louder in the stillness. Her team struggled to keep up. Another door, heavy, reinforced. A lock glinted in the lantern light. She dropped to one knee, examined it. Not military, improvised, which meant whoever was inside wasn't meant to leave. Vega raised his rifle. "Blow it." Elena shook her head sharply. Noise would bring every hostile down on them. Ramirez, picks. Ramirez crouched, pulling a small kit from his vest. His hands moved quickly, practiced. Clicks echoed, each one a drumbeat against Elena's ribs. Then snap, the lock gave. She pushed the door open. The smell hit her first. Sweat, blood, decay. Then the sight, dim light revealing figures huddled against the far wall, prisoners, at least half a dozen. Thin, broken, eyes wide with disbelief as soldiers flooded into their cage. Dawson lowered his rifle, stunned. Holy. Vega swore under his breath. Ramirez moved forward, checking them quickly. Alive, barely. But Elena didn't hear them. Her eyes scanned the faces, heart racing, breath ragged. One face, that's all she needed. And then she froze. A man, thin, beard grown wild, eyes sunken but burning. His head lifted slowly as if it took every ounce of strength he had. And when his gaze met hers, recognition sparked. Elena, his voice cracked, hoarse, a whisper dragged from the depths of suffering. Her chest constricted so hard she couldn't breathe. Ramirez looked between them, confused. Captain, you know him. She didn't answer, couldn't. Her hand gripped the doorframe so tight her knuckles whitened. Memories assaulted her, nights of guilt, the choice she made, the voice in her head that never stopped accusing her. He was here, he was alive. And now everything was different. Get them out, she managed to whisper, voice unsteady. Her team moved fast, cutting bindings, lifting weakened bodies. Dawson handed water to trembling hands. Vega muttered encouragements. Ramirez's eyes never left Elena, suspicion sharpening. But she barely noticed. Her gaze stayed on the man she left behind. He tried to stand, faltered, caught himself. His eyes never left hers. There was no anger in them, no blame, just something heavier, something harder to bear. And in that moment, Elena realized this mission wasn't about orders anymore. It wasn't about maps or strategies. It was about this, facing the ghost she thought she'd lost. Gunfire erupted in the distance, closer now. Shouts in the corridors. Contact incoming, Vega barked. Ramirez swore, we need to move now. Elena snapped back to reality. She shouldered her rifle, eyes narrowing, mask sliding back into place. Dawson, take point with the prisoners. Vega, rear guard. Ramirez on me. They formed up, guiding the weak and wounded down the corridor. Gunfire echoed closer, footsteps pounding against stone. Elena's heartbeat thundered. She glanced once at the man beside her, alive but fragile, each step a battle. She wanted to reach out to steady him, but she didn't. Instead, she raised her rifle, scanning ahead, ready to carve a path through hell if she had to. Because now the mission had changed. Now it was about redemption. How far can guilt carry you before it breaks you? The corridors shook with gunfire. Bullets pinged off stone, sparks scattering like dying stars. The prisoners stumbled forward, weak legs dragging, guided by Dawson and Vega's desperate hands. Elena moved at the front, rifle raised, body taut with purpose. Every shadow could hold death. Every second could be the last. Her lungs burned with every breath, not just from the smoke, but from the weight of what she'd just seen. He was alive. After all these years, alive. And yet, instead of relief, a different fire churned inside her. The fire of a question that would not leave her alone. How could he look at me without hate? Left corridor clear, Vega shouted, sweat dripping down his temple. His voice was a hammer, steadying the rhythm of their retreat. Keep them moving, Ramirez barked, practically dragging one of the prisoners himself. His eyes flicked once toward Elena, sharp, questioning, but he bit back the words. This wasn't the time. They reached an intersection, 3 hallways, shadows stretching in all directions. Elena raised a fist. Everyone froze. The silence pressed in. Her ears strained. Boots, too many coming fast. North wing, she whispered. They're closing in. Vega grimaced. Then where? Elena's mind mapped the compound in an instant. She studied its skeleton, memorized its veins. She could almost feel the air pulling them toward an exit, faint drafts sneaking through cracks in the walls. She pointed west, this way. No one argued. They trusted her instincts, or maybe they just didn't have a choice. The group surged forward. Prisoners wheezed, coughed, stumbled. Dawson practically carried one across his shoulders, face red with effort but determination blazing in his young eyes. Elena caught it, that stubborn fire the kind soldiers carried when they'd found something bigger than fear to fight for. But not all fires burned clean. They reached a heavy steel door at the hall's end. Ramirez slammed a shoulder against it. Locked. "Time?" Vega asked, voice tight. "None," Elena said. Ramirez pulled his rifle up. "Blow it." Elena stopped him with a glare. "Noise will bury us." He stared back, jaw tight, then shoved his rifle aside. "Then what?" Elena stepped forward, dropped her pack, and pulled out a small breaching tool, a charge meant for quiet work, not brute force. She pressed it against the lock, fingers moving quick, precise. Behind her, Vega muttered low to Dawson, "We're dead either way." But Dawson shook his head. "She'll get us through." The charge sizzled, popped. The lock gave. Elena pushed the door open, stale air rushing past her face, carrying the scent of dust and outside wind. "Hope. Move," she ordered. They spilled into a stairwell, boots clanging against rusted metal steps. Down, down, every step a drumbeat against her skull. Prisoners stumbled, some nearly falling, caught by desperate arms. And then voices below, "Enemy." Elena's breath froze. She raised a fist, signaling halt. Ramirez leaned close. "They'll hear us if we stop." "They'll kill us if we don't," she hissed back. She crouched, peered over the railing. Flashlights swayed in the dark below, beams slicing through dust. 2 guards, weapons ready, scanning the shadows. Her finger brushed the trigger. She could take them, quick, silent. But before she could move, a sound rose behind them, a prisoner's cough. Loud, wet. The flashlight snapped upward. Shouts erupted. "Elena!" Ramirez barked. She didn't think. She fired. 1 guard dropped. Vega fired the second, who fell with a crash that echoed up the stairwell like thunder. Chaos, shouts erupted deeper below. Reinforcements. "No time," Elena growled. "Down." They surged forward, practically dragging the prisoners. The stairwell shook with footsteps from both above and below now. "Caught in the middle." Vega swore under his breath. "They've boxed us in." Elena's eyes darted. The walls, the railings, the cracks in the structure. A map unfolded in her head, not just of what was, but of what could be. She spotted it, a small service door to their left, nearly hidden behind pipes. She sprinted, yanked it open. A tunnel, narrow, dark, reeking of damp air and rust. "Here," she ordered. Dawson shoved the prisoners in first, urgency in every motion. Vega covered, rifle spitting short, precise bursts at shadows chasing them. Ramirez grabbed Elena's arm hard. "You sure about this? Tunnels could collapse." She met his eyes, steady, unflinching. "Better than dying here." He stared a beat longer, searching her face for something: truth, fear, maybe the secret she still carried. But all he found was resolve. So he nodded, shoved her inside. The tunnel swallowed them whole. It was narrow, claustrophobic, forcing them to crouch, crawl, drag themselves forward. Prisoners groaned, weak bodies scraping against stone. The air was thick with damp, every breath like drowning. Darkness pressed against Elena's skin, clinging, suffocating. Her heart pounded, not from fear of the tunnel, from the weight crawling beside her. The man, the one she left behind. His breathing was ragged, shallow, each inhale a struggle. She heard it more than she saw him, heard it and hated herself for it. He should have hated her. Instead, his voice came soft, strained, almost breaking. "You came back." The words froze her blood. She wanted to answer, wanted to confess everything. How many nights she'd relived her decision. how many times she'd whispered his name into the dark when no one could hear. But soldiers don't confess in tunnels, not when lives depend on silence. So she said nothing, and that silence hurt more than bullets. The tunnel stretched on endlessly, every inch crawling, dragging. Dawson's breathing grew ragged as he carried the weight of a man too weak to move himself. Vega cursed under his breath, muttering about the walls pressing closer. Ramirez kept the line moving, his voice gruff, commanding. Elena stayed near the front, eyes darting, ears straining. The tunnel bent, curved, finally opening into a chamber where faint moonlight leaked through a broken grate above. Freedom! They climbed one by one, hands scraping stone, bodies trembling with effort. Prisoners lifted, pulled by strong arms, carried on backs. Soldiers straining against exhaustion, against gravity, against time itself. When Elena reached the surface, the night hit her like a wave. Fresh air, stars overhead. The compound behind them looming like a monster in the dark. But freedom wasn't safety. Because headlights flared in the distance. Engines roared, enemy trucks closing fast. Vega cursed, "We're cut off." Ramirez scanned the horizon, jaw tight. "We can't outrun them carrying this many." Dawson looked at Elena, panic flashing in his young eyes. "Captain, what do we do?" All eyes turned to her, even his, the man she left behind. And in that moment, Elena felt the crushing weight of command, of guilt, of redemption pressing into her chest. She could almost hear her heartbeat echoing against the dirt. What choice could save them? And what choice would damn her again? How do you lead others when you can't forgive yourself? The headlights burned against the night like hungry eyes. Engines roared, closer, louder, a pack of wolves smelling blood. The squad froze in the open field, half-crouched, prisoners leaning on them like anchors. There was no cover, no high ground, just raw exposure beneath the indifferent stars. Elena scanned the horizon, brain racing. Options, few, choices, none that didn't end in blood. Vega hissed between his teeth, "We're dead standing here." Ramirez's jaw flexed. "We can split, draw fire, some of us might make it." "No," Dawson cut in, his young voice sharp, almost breaking. "We don't leave them." His arm tightened around the prisoner slung over his back. His hands shook, but his voice carried conviction. "We brought them this far, we finish it." Elena's chest ached. That kind of fire, it reminded her of herself once, before scars, before silence. Engines grew louder, dust rising like a storm cloud. And then a sound, distant, faint, the thump-thump-thump of rotor blades. Her head snapped upward, black silhouettes cutting across the stars. Friendly, enemy, no way to know. Vega squinted. Choppers, but whose? Elena's lips pressed tight. If they were hostile, they'd be dead before they hit the ground. But if they were theirs? "Signal?" Ramirez asked. She shook her head. "Too risky. A flare would paint them like targets." The headlights swerved, circling. Trucks spread wide, fanning to surround. Soldiers jumped from the beds, rifles raised, shouting in harsh voices. Her squad tensed, fingers on triggers, prisoners cowering behind them. It was the kind of moment where time slows, where every decision lives forever. Elena inhaled once steady and made her choice. "Form a line, we hold." Vega shot her a look, disbelief in his eyes. "You're insane, outnumbered, outgunned." "Form a line." Her voice cut like steel, no room for argument. Something in her tone, the certainty, the raw edge, snapped him quiet. He nodded once, bitter, but obeyed. They spread out, rifles raised, shielding the prisoners behind them. Dust swirled, engines howled, shouts grew closer. Elena stood at the center, rifle tight against her shoulder. Her pulse roared in her ears, but her face stayed calm. If death came tonight, it would meet her standing. The trucks closed in, headlights blinded. And then the sky split. The helicopters swooped low, their silhouettes massive, thundering. Spotlights flared, cutting through darkness. Voices cracked across comms, familiar, blessedly familiar. Friendly forces inbound, hold position. Gunfire erupted, but not at Elena's squad. Chopper-mounted guns shredded the approaching trucks, bullets tearing dirt and metal apart. Explosions lit the night. Enemy soldiers scattered, their formation collapsing in chaos. Relief surged like water through dry veins. Vega let out a sharp bark of laughter, half-crazed. Dawson whooped, his voice breaking. Even Ramirez's shoulders sagged in momentary release. But Elena didn't move, didn't smile. She kept her rifle raised, eyes scanning, body rigid. Because relief was dangerous. Relief got people killed. Only when the last truck lay burning, smoke coiling into the stars, did she lower her weapon. The helicopters touched down nearby, rotors whipping dust into violent spirals. Soldiers poured out, their soldiers, finally, mercifully. "Evac," Ramirez barked, already hauling prisoners toward the choppers. Dawson followed, carrying his burden, nearly stumbling from exhaustion but refusing to drop him. Vega brought up the rear, muttering curses of gratitude under his breath. Elena lingered a moment, scanning the battlefield, listening to the crackle of fire, the groans of twisted metal. Her chest heaved, her body trembled, not from fear, from the storm inside her that wouldn't let go. Then she turned, guiding the man him toward the chopper. His steps were slow, unsteady. Every time he faltered, her hand twitched, aching to reach out to hold him. But she couldn't. Not after what she'd done. When they finally lifted off, the ground shrinking beneath them, Elena stared out the open door. The compound faded into distance, swallowed by night. And yet the further they flew, the heavier the weight in her chest grew. Because she knew escape wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something harder. The flight back was quiet, too quiet. Soldiers slumped, prisoners huddled, rotors chopping endlessly. Vega closed his eyes, head tilted back, the lines on his face etched deep with fatigue. Dawson leaned against the wall, still clutching that locket in his hand, lips moving in silent prayer. Ramirez stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, lost in thought. Elena sat across from the man. His eyes were closed, his chest rising and falling shallowly. His face was gaunt, skin stretched tight over bone. But even through the exhaustion, there was strength in him. A presence that hadn't died, even after all this time. Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to explain, to beg. But all she could do was sit in silence, her hands gripping her rifle so tight her knuckles blanched. When they landed at base, the chaos began, medics rushing forward, prisoners lifted onto stretchers, voices shouting orders, boots pounding against concrete. The man was pulled away from her, swallowed by the flurry. For a moment, panic clawed her chest, irrational, desperate. Then his eyes found hers across the chaos. And again, no anger, no accusation, just something unreadable. That was worse. Because anger she could fight, silence she couldn't. Hours blurred, debriefings, reports, equipment dropped, rifles cleaned. The squad scattered, exhausted bodies finally giving in to sleep. Elena couldn't. She stood in the operations room, alone, staring at the map again. The red marker was gone, the compound erased from their mission board, but inside her it still burned. She pressed her palms flat against the table, head bowed. Her mind replayed his voice in the tunnel. "You came back." 3 words, just 3, and yet they split her in 2. Because he was wrong. She hadn't come back for him, not then. Years ago, when it mattered most, she'd walked away. And no mission, no rescue, no act of courage could erase that choice. The door creaked, footsteps entered, soft, deliberate. Elena. Her head snapped up. Him, standing in the doorway, frail but upright, eyes steady. Her throat closed. She hadn't expected him so soon. He stepped closer, each movement a struggle but unyielding. "We need to talk." She opened her mouth, but no words came. Because deep down she knew, this conversation would change everything. The operations room was quiet, lit only by the dull glow of wall screens and the steady hum of servers. Maps flickered, dotted lines marked flight paths, but the war outside those walls felt distant now, muted by the weight of something heavier. Elena stood rigid, hands gripping the edge of the strategy table, shoulders squared as if bracing against an invisible blast. The door clicked shut behind him. She didn't turn, couldn't, not yet. "Elena," his voice came again, low but steady. There was strain in it, the rasp of someone who had endured chains and hunger, but it carried the same tone she remembered, the same anchor in chaos. She squeezed her eyes shut, fighting the tremor rising in her chest. "You should be resting," she managed, her voice flat. "I've rested long enough." She turned then, slowly, as if every second delayed the inevitable. He stood only a few feet away, thinner than she remembered, but his presence filled the room. His uniform hung loose, borrowed, the insignia gone. His hair was streaked with gray now, his face hardened by years in captivity. But his eyes, those eyes hadn't changed. Steady, searching, burning. They locked onto her like they always had. And suddenly she felt small, like the young officer who had once looked to him for direction, for strength. He took a step closer. "We need to talk." Her throat tightened. "About what happened?" "Yes," his jaw flexed. "About the night you left me." The words cut like a blade. She looked away, her chest aching with the weight of memory. The night replayed again, merciless. The ambush, the order to retreat, his voice over the comms, steady but final. "Go, Elena, that's an order." And she had gone. Not because she wanted to, not because she believed he deserved to be left, but because she obeyed. Obedience had saved her squad, but it had condemned him. Her silence stretched until it felt suffocating. Finally, she forced herself to meet his gaze. "I had no choice." He didn't flinch, didn't soften. "There's always a choice." Her nails dug into the table's edge. "If I had stayed, they'd all be dead. Every single one of them, you knew that. You ordered me to go. And you obeyed." His voice was calm, but beneath it she heard the tremor of anger or maybe grief. "You didn't question it. You didn't fight it. You just left." The air between them vibrated, heavy with things unsaid. Her breath came sharp. "You think I don't replay that night every damn day? You think I don't see your face every time I close my eyes?" Her voice cracked and she hated herself for it. She slammed her fist against the table, trying to bury the weakness. "I live with it. I live with you rotting in a cell because of me. Don't you dare think I don't carry that." His eyes softened just slightly, but his voice stayed hard. "And yet you stand here alive while he broke off, inhaling, steadying. "While I was gone, years I will never get back." Silence. It was worse than shouting. Elena's pulse pounded in her temples. She wanted him to scream, to curse her, to let the rage spill, anything but this cold, measured weight. At last he stepped closer. His voice dropped lower, intimate, cutting. "Why did you come back?" Her lips parted, but nothing came. Because she couldn't say it, couldn't admit that she hadn't come back for him, not at first. But looking at him now, she knew he'd see through every lie. "I came back," she whispered, "because I couldn't live with leaving you again." His eyes searched hers, unblinking, unrelenting. The seconds stretched, each one a test. Then finally he exhaled, a slow, weary sound. "You carry guilt like it's armor." Her jaw tightened. "But guilt isn't the same as atonement." The words landed heavier than bullets. Her body sagged, the weight pressing her down. She swallowed hard. "Then tell me how, tell me what I can do." He looked at her for a long moment. The silence stretched, the air between them thick. Finally he spoke. "Live differently, lead differently. Prove to them and to yourself that you can choose more than orders." Her breath hitched. "That's all I ask," he finished, voice softer now. "Not vengeance, not penance, just choice." Her vision blurred and she blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall. His hand twitched like he might reach for her. For a moment she almost hoped he would. But he didn't. He turned instead, moving toward the door. At the threshold he paused. "We're not done, Elena. This conversation isn't over." And then he was gone. The door shut. She stood frozen, chest heaving, hands trembling against the cold steel of the table. "Not done." The words echoed, louder than rotor blades, louder than gunfire. She knew he was right. The conversation wasn't over. Because the war outside wasn't the only one she had to fight. The war inside her was just beginning. The night dragged on, sleepless. She walked the base corridors like a ghost, boots echoing against concrete, the faint hum of generators filling the silence. Every shadow seemed to whisper with memory. In the barracks, her squad lay sprawled in exhaustion. Vega snored lightly, his face softened by sleep. Dawson clutched his locket even in dreams. Ramirez shifted restlessly, jaw tight even unconscious. They trusted her, followed her, believed in her. But if they knew the truth, if they knew she had abandoned the man they just risked everything to save, would they still look at her the same way? She stood at the threshold, watching them. A pang of fear and longing twisted her chest. Then footsteps echoed behind her. "Elena." She turned, Vega rubbing his eyes, hair a mess but awake. He studied her, brow furrowed. "You good?" She forced a smile that felt brittle. "Fine." "Yeah," he snorted softly. "That's a lie." She opened her mouth, but he cut in. "You don't have to carry it all alone, you know." Her chest tightened. "You don't understand." "Maybe not." His gaze softened. "But I know this: if you keep looking backward, you'll miss what's right in front of you." For a moment his words hung in the air, heavier than he knew. She turned away, swallowing hard. "Get some sleep, Vega." He hesitated, then nodded. "Don't stay lost in the dark too long, Captain." When he was gone she exhaled, long and shuddering. The dark felt endless, but for the first time she wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of it. If she could find the courage to take it. What happens when the orders you've been given feel like chains? That question gnawed at Elena as dawn crept across the desert horizon. The base buzzed with activity, crates being loaded, vehicles fueled, soldiers tightening straps and checking weapons. Another mission, another risk. She should have felt steady. This was familiar ground, yet beneath her calm exterior doubt churned. She'd faced her past, or at least the beginnings of it, but the words from the night before still echoed in her chest. "Prove you can choose more than orders." Now she would have to. The briefing room smelled faintly of coffee and dust. Maps spread across the table showed a valley cut deep between two ridgelines. A village sat tucked against its edge, marked in red. Vega leaned forward, tapping the paper. "Intel says the enemy has been using the old stone houses for cover, heavy weapons inside. If they dig in any further, we'll lose supply convoys coming through this corridor." "Airstrike?" Ramirez asked, voice flat. "Negative," Dawson replied. "Too many civilians. We need precision, boots on the ground." All eyes turned to Elena. The silence pressed in, thick and expectant. She felt the weight of command settle heavy on her shoulders. Every second stretched as she studied the map. She heard again the rasp of his voice in the operations room, "Just choice." And she realized this was her moment. Not to prove she could follow the plan, but to show she could lead differently. She drew a breath, steady. "We go in at dusk, staggered teams, no heavy push. We'll isolate each house, clear methodically, minimal collateral. Civilians come first, even if it slows us down." Ramirez frowned. "That's risky. Enemy has the high ground, will be exposed." "I know." Her voice didn't waver. "But if we treat every wall like an enemy nest instead of a home, we'll lose what we're trying to protect." The room stayed quiet, soldiers exchanging glances. Vega gave the faintest nod. Elena held the silence, waiting. Then, softly but firmly, "This isn't just about winning ground. It's about who we are when we take it." At last, Ramirez leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "Fine, we do it your way." Decision made. But the unease lingered, because she knew this wasn't only about tactical risks. It was about her, about proving that when the time came, she wouldn't leave people behind again. The sun bled into the horizon, painting the sky orange and red. Elena crouched behind a ridge with her squad, the cool evening air brushing against her skin. Shadows lengthened, cloaking the valley in deepening dark. "Dusk insertion," Vega whispered beside her, adjusting his rifle. "Always feels like the calm before a storm." She nodded, gaze locked on the village below. A cluster of stone walls and narrow alleys, smoke from cooking fires curling upward. Children darted between doorways, oblivious to the danger. Her chest tightened, civilians first. Through the headset, Command's voice crackled. "Alpha, you are green." Elena raised her hand, motioned forward. The team slipped into motion, moving like shadows. Boots pressed soft into the earth, rifles tight to shoulders, breath steady. As they descended, the sounds of the village grew louder, laughter of children, the clatter of pots, the distant bleat of goats. It was almost surreal, a world alive within a war. Then came the sharper sound, metal on stone, a cough of radio static, the faint clink of a weapon being shifted. They were close. "Two ahead," Ramirez murmured through comms. "Roofline left side." Elena froze. She could see the glint of steel in the fading light, the silhouette of rifles against the sky. Enemy sentries. Standard orders would have been quick, clean elimination. But her pulse thudded, and the words from the night before returned. "Prove you can choose more." She leaned into her mic. "Hold fire." Ramirez hissed, "They'll spot us." "Not if we move smart." She motioned with her hand, directing Vega and Dawson to flank wide through the shadows of a crumbled wall. She led Ramirez in close, slipping between alleys, the earth cool beneath her gloves. Step by careful step they climbed. The enemy silhouettes loomed larger. Their voices carried low, careless chatter. One wrong sound, one scrape of boot against stone, and the night would erupt in violence. Elena's heart pounded, not from fear of death but from the weight of the choice. Then a snap. A child's laugh, shrill and sudden, echoing from the street below. The sentries turned their heads. Elena moved. She surged forward, silent as breath, her hand snapping against the nearest rifle, shoving it skyward. Before the enemy could cry out, Ramirez had the second in a chokehold, silencing him. The scuffle lasted seconds, then silence. Two bodies lay unconscious, bound quickly with flexcuffs, alive. Elena exhaled, chest heaving. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding her breath. Vega's voice crackled through the calm, "Clear on our side, no shots fired." Relief washed over her, a small victory. Maybe choices didn't always have to bleed. The deeper they moved into the village, the more fragile the calm became. Doors creaked shut at their approach. Shadows darted in windows. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cried. Then the sharp echo of gunfire. Her team dove for cover as rounds ripped through the air, sparking off stone. Dust filled the night. "Contact east side," Ramirez shouted. Elena pressed against the wall, heart hammering. She could hear civilians screaming, scattering. Dawson spoke now. A plume of gray erupted, swallowing the alley. Under cover, they pushed forward, rifles sweeping corners. The enemy had dug in hard, two heavy weapons in a window, spraying rounds without pause. But through the chaos, Elena saw something else. A figure, small, trembling, crouched in the corner of the same building. A child, no older than 10, trapped against the wall. Her blood ran cold. Ramirez suppress. On it. Gunfire cracked, buying seconds. Elena darted forward, low and fast, ignoring the sting of shards and the deafening roar. She reached the corner, grabbing the boy, pulling him tight against her chest. His eyes were wide, terrified, his tiny frame shaking in her arms. "It's okay," she whispered, voice steady despite the storm. "I've got you, you're safe." She dragged him back, shielding him with her body as Vega covered her. When they reached the alley's safety, the boy clung to her, face buried against her vest. Elena's heart pounded, but for once it wasn't guilt or fear. It was something else, something steadier. Joyce. She had chosen him. The firefight raged on, each house contested, each street a gamble. But slowly, methodically, they advanced. Civilians were pulled from homes, shielded, guided to safety. The mission wasn't clean, but it was human. Hours later, as dawn broke pale across the ridges, the gunfire ceased. The last of the enemy had fled into the hills. The village stood battered but standing. Her squad regrouped in the square, exhausted, faces smeared with soot and sweat. Vega dropped onto a broken step, letting out a long breath. "Well, that was one hell of a choice, Captain." Elena managed a faint smile, the boy she had saved still clutching her hand. For the first time in years, the weight on her chest felt lighter. Not gone, never gone, but lighter. She glanced toward the ridgeline, where the horizon stretched endless and uncertain. Maybe this was what redemption looked like. Not a grand gesture, not undoing the past. Just one choice, one life. And the courage to keep choosing again. What breaks a soldier first, the bullet or the silence that follows? Elena sat on the edge of a crumbled wall, dawn light spilling pale across the village square. Her squad moved among the ruins, tending wounds, checking on civilians, gathering supplies. The air smelled of smoke and dust, thick with the metallic tang of gunfire still lingering. The boy she had saved clung to his mother, now safe, though the woman's eyes carried both gratitude and fear. Fear of the uniforms, fear of what they brought, even in the name of protection. Elena couldn't blame her. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion clawing at her bones. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind refused. Because something gnawed deeper. The mission had been a success on paper, village secured, civilians unharmed, enemy scattered. But beneath the statistics lay questions that didn't fade with victory. How many risks had she forced on her squad by slowing down? How many seconds from disaster had they lived on because she refused to strike harder, faster? And worst of all, how long until command questioned her choices? "Captain." She lifted her head. Ramirez stood before her, helmet tucked under his arm, jaw tight. His eyes burned with something sharp. "We need to talk." She nodded, pushing herself upright. He didn't wait for privacy. His words came like bullets. "You endangered us." Her breath hitched. "I saved civilians." "You saved one child while we were pinned under heavy fire. That call could have gotten us all killed." The square seemed to shrink around them, every sound fading. Vega and Dawson glanced over, sensing the storm but kept their distance. Elena met Ramirez's glare head-on. "I made a choice, one I stand by." Ramirez's voice dropped lower, but the anger pulsed hotter. "We don't get to gamble with each other's lives for guilt you can't let go." Her chest tightened. He knew. He didn't need to say it outright. The ghost of her past hung over every word. "You think I don't notice?" he pressed. "The way you hesitate, the way you carry his shadow into every order you give. You're not leading us, you're chasing redemption." The accusation hit harder than gunfire. Her hands curled into fists. "And what would you have me do, Ramirez? Pretend it doesn't matter. Pretend I haven't made mistakes that cost people everything." His voice cracked, not with weakness but raw frustration. "We've all made mistakes, but if you keep letting yours steer us, you'll make new ones that bury us alive." The silence that followed was jagged, slicing into her. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. because deep down she feared he was right. Vega stepped in then, slow but firm. Enough. He looked at Ramirez, then at Elena, his gaze softer but steady. We followed her into that fire, and we're standing here. That counts for something. Ramirez shook his head, exhaling sharp, then walked away, his boots crunching against the rubble. Elena stood rooted, her chest burning. Vega lingered. He's angry, but he's not wrong. Her lips trembled, words catching. Then maybe I don't deserve this command. Vega's brow furrowed. Or maybe this is what command really is, carrying the weight even when it breaks you. She wanted to believe him, needed to. But doubt pressed harder than armor. That night the base felt colder than usual. The air held a bite, seeping into her bones as she walked the dim halls. She stopped outside the infirmary. The door stood slightly ajar, lamplight spilling across the corridor. Inside, she heard his voice, steady, deliberate. The man she had once abandoned. She froze. I heard how she led today, he was saying to the medic. How she pulled a child out under fire, that, Elena. The medic murmured something, words too soft to catch. His voice came again, quieter now. But she doesn't trust herself. Not yet. She'll make choices, good ones, but until she forgives herself, she'll always question if they're enough. Elena's throat tightened. She shouldn't be listening. Shouldn't be standing there like a thief stealing words meant for someone else. But she couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Because hearing him speak her truth aloud felt like someone pulling a blade out of her chest. Painful, but freeing. She stepped back before the door creaked, her boots silent against the floor. And for the first time in years, she let herself whisper into the dark, maybe I can. The next mission came sooner than expected. Command's orders were terse, a convoy ambushed, supplies stolen, enemy retreating north with stolen munitions, immediate pursuit. The plan was straightforward, intercept, neutralize, recover. But the terrain wasn't forgiving, narrow mountain passes, steep ridges, paths where one wrong move meant death. Her squad readied quickly, the weight of exhaustion replaced by the sharper weight of urgency. Yet as they moved out, tension simmered. Ramirez marched in silence, eyes forward, every line of his body rigid. Elena felt it, the crack in trust. As the mountains rose around them, the air thinned, the silence heavy. Rocks shifted under boots, echoing through the pass like distant drums. Hours in, Dawson froze. He lifted his hand. Movement ahead. Elena crouched, heart steady now, eyes narrowing. She saw them, enemy fighters, moving slow, hauling crates across the ridge. Armed, alert. She signaled the squad down, her mind racing. Orders would have been clear. Strike fast, strike hard. But she scanned the terrain, the ridges above. Civilians, shepherds, the chance wasn't zero. And she realized the choice wasn't between orders and hesitation anymore. It was between fear and conviction. She turned to Ramirez. His eyes met hers, guarded, waiting. We flank left, she said, voice steady. Cut their escape without tearing this valley apart. A pause. Ramirez studied her. Then, after a long beat, he nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was trust. And for the first time, Elena felt like maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to earn it. But trust, like silence, can shatter in a single second. As they swept the ridge, the enemy scattered. Gunfire erupted, dust and stone exploding. Elena pressed against a boulder, shouting orders, her squad moving in sync. Then came the blast. A mine buried shallow. The earth shook, a roar ripping through the pass. When the dust cleared, someone was down. Vega. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the rock. Elena's heart stopped. Her squad's shouts blurred, drowned in the pounding of her pulse. This wasn't guilt, this wasn't memory. This was now. And she had seconds to choose. Why did the silence feel heavier than the gunfire that came before? The compound was smoke and shadow, its corridors choked with the smell of cordite and burned metal. Lights flickered, sparking wires hissing as if the building itself was exhaling its last breath. The team moved through it like ghosts, their boots crunching glass, weapons raised though the worst had already passed. And then there was her. Elena walked at the center, helmet tucked beneath her arm, her steps deliberate, slow. Her uniform was smeared with soot, streaks of blood that weren't all her own, and yet she carried herself as if some invisible thread still held her spine straight. The others spoke in fragments, code words, half-formed orders, mumbled prayers, but she stayed silent. She had said all she needed to say. And in truth, the words would have broken something sacred in this moment. Because the mission had been completed, the package secured, the lives lost counted and carried inside them like stones in their chests. But what had been won, and at what cost? A soldier ahead pushed a broken door aside, its hinges shrieking. Moonlight poured into the corridor, pale and cold, cutting through the smoke. The night outside stretched endless, stars sharp above a ruined earth. They paused there, 5 soldiers, half a team where once there were 10, and looked to her. She didn't give a speech. She didn't salute. She didn't even nod. She just walked forward, her boots echoing against the metal ramp that led out, each step ringing hollow like a bell struck in mourning. And somehow that was enough. Later they waited on the tarmac. The transport bird's engines howled in the distance, a rising storm of steel wings and rotor wash. She sat apart from the others, perched on a crate near the edge of the landing zone. Her rifle lay across her knees, hands resting over it not as a weapon now, but as if it were a memory or a weight she couldn't set down. Across from her, Corporal Hayes lit a cigarette. His face was drawn, streaked with grime, eyes sunken from hours of adrenaline and loss. He looked at her once as though wanting to speak, but the words didn't come. Instead, he exhaled smoke and turned toward the horizon. "You didn't have to stay behind in that hall," he muttered finally, not meeting her eyes. "We'd have made it either way." Her gaze stayed on the rifle. "No," she said softly, "you wouldn't have." The truth carried no pride, no anger, just fact. And maybe that was what unsettled him more than anything else, the calm with which she bore the memory of what she had done in that dark hallway, when the team retreated and she had turned back. There had been a choice, always a choice. And she had chosen to be the shadow in their place. The engines roared closer. The bird touched down in a storm of dust and sound. One by one the team rose, some limping, some leaning on each other. And then her. She stood slowly, slinging the rifle across her back. For a moment she looked at the compound far behind them, a broken silhouette against the sky. No one else turned back, only her. Because what she saw there wasn't just walls and rubble. She saw echoes, voices, the ones who hadn't walked out, the ones she would carry in silence. When she stepped onto the ramp of the transport, the others moved aside unconsciously, giving her space though no order had been given. She sat alone near the rear hatch, wind whipping her hair as the aircraft lifted. The night shrank beneath them, towns like dying embers, roads like veins of faint light, the compound now just a scar. She closed her eyes, not to rest, but to hold it all tighter, to make sure none of it slipped away. Hours later, the transport landed on a forward base. Floodlights cast long shadows over the field, soldiers moving with mechanical precision around them. Medics rushed to the wounded. Officers barked clipped instructions. Engines thundered. And yet, in the chaos of arrival, no one noticed her slip away. She walked toward the edge of the airfield, boots sinking into loose gravel, until she reached the wire fence that overlooked the desert stretching endless under the dawn. She leaned her forehead against the cold steel, eyes closed, the chill of it anchoring her. She remembered a question her brother once asked her, years ago, before he deployed on his last mission. "Do you think anyone remembers the names of those who never come back?" At the time, she had no answer. She had just hugged him harder, told him she would see him soon. But she hadn't. Now she carried that silence with her, and maybe that was why she had chosen this path, why she kept stepping into shadows others avoided. Because memory, unspoken, was its own kind of vow. She whispered then, so softly the wind nearly swallowed it, "I remember." The days that followed blurred into reports, debriefs, words on paper that tried to quantify what could never truly be measured. Success, casualties, intel secured. But no report spoke of the sound of footsteps in that hall. No form recorded the moment when choice became sacrifice. Those things lived only in her. And though others moved on, laughed again, filled the silence with routine, she held it. Because someone had to. Weeks later, at a ceremony no cameras attended, a folded flag was placed into the hands of a mother who trembled as if the earth itself shook beneath her. Elena stood at the back, cap in hand, her eyes lowered. She didn't step forward. She didn't need to. Because this wasn't about her. It never was. When the ceremony ended, when the crowd dispersed, she remained by the stone wall where the names of the fallen were carved. Her fingers traced one in particular, a name that still burned like a wound. Her brother. She hadn't saved him, could never change that. But maybe, in saving others, she kept him alive in a way no stone or ceremony ever could. Night fell again, calm, quiet, unbroken. And somewhere in the dark hallways of memory, her footsteps still echoed, not for glory, not for recognition, but for the simple, unshakable truth that sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts, and then leaves its mark in silence.